Hi, this is Ant from Speakerstack Music. Welcome back. Today's video we're going to be having a look at the compressor audio effect. So I've opened up a song which really is just some drums and lead guitar. We're going to be having a look at applying some compression to the lead guitar. So the compressor can be found in the audio effects drop down section of the instruments and presets. And you've got a number of different presets you can click on here, but we're just going to be using the stock compressor. So I'm going to click on that and drag it into the instrument channel, and there you can see it's coming out in the audio effects section down here. So what does a compression do? What does a compressor do? Essentially, it flattens the spikes in audio volume, those volume fluctuations that you get when you're recording audio, such as guitar or vocals. So it kind of reduces that dynamic range of audio, reduces the top end, and potentially boosts the low end of the signal. So if we click on the audio that I've recorded, you'll see here, well, it's in stereo, so we've got two sections here, two patterns. Essentially, you'll see that in the widest parts of the audio that we've recorded, you've got some spikes going up, and then you've got some sections where it gets narrower. So where it gets wider, where there are spikes coming out, is where the sound is getting louder, and where it gets narrower is where the sound is getting quieter in terms of decibels. But you've got a number of spikes coming out where the audio has got a lot louder, and obviously that will vary depending on what you've recorded. You might have some extreme fluctuations in volume sound with some vocals, for example, or you might have something like a guitar where it's a bit smoother, but you do still have some fluctuations. So what a compressor enables you to do is smooth out and reduce down those extreme spikes in sound in that dynamic range of audio, so that you're getting a less dramatic kind of fluctuations in volume. It basically takes the top bit of the audio signal where those extreme spikes are off the recording. So we've dropped a compressor into the audio track. And the first thing I'm going to do is take off the makeup gain, and we'll deal with that in a separate video. What it essentially does is it compensates for the compression that you're adding onto a track, because what compression essentially does is it takes off some of the volume, because you're compressing the top end of the higher ranges of the loudness of the song. So you're cutting out some of those higher volume ranges, you're removing the volume, the high level of volume from the track. So makeup gain automatically compensates for that and boosts the volume back up to where it was before. But we're going to take that off because we're going to do that boost using the out signal. So you've got a number of things happening in the compressor. You've got a threshold chart or bar. This is essentially you setting the level in decibels where you want Ableton to start to compress the signal. So the more you drag this down, you're lowering the threshold, the more you're increasing the compression that's added to the audio signal that you've recorded. The higher you go, the less you're applying compression. What we're essentially saying is that the higher the threshold, the less sensitive we want Ableton to be to the audio sound, and the less we want it to compress it. So if I just play this, you'll get an idea of where the volume is coming out in this threshold so far as it currently stands. So you'll see the volume's coming out about here, so it's well below the threshold we've set. But we can adjust the threshold level and therefore reduce the decibels and the volume in which the track is basically applying compression at those high ends of the audio sound. So with this here, you see I've set it at minus 14 decibels. What we're essentially saying is that anything above that, minus 14 decibels in sound, we want Ableton to compress it and reduce the volume down in it. So it's squashing the sound down for all of the audio signal that's above 17 decibels, or sorry, 14 decibels. And you'll see that the gain reduction is starting to flash there, because what that is telling us is that we're actually reducing the gain at that point. So that's the threshold. The other parameters that you've got on this are ratio, which essentially changes how intensely Ableton compresses the signal. So what this means is 2 to 1. So for every 2 decibels that it goes above 14 decibels, we're compressing it down to 1 decibel above. But you can change that, so you can have it down to something like, for every 6 decibels it goes over 14 decibels, which is here, you're compressing it back down to 1 decibel. So that's even more intensely applying the compression. Obviously, if you have it down as a ratio of 1 to 1, that's no compression at all, because what you're essentially saying is for every 1 decibel it goes above 14 decibels, you want to compress it back down by 1. So you're not actually applying any compression. The other thing to mention is the attack. This is how quickly it compresses once it goes above that threshold that you set, which we have here as 14 decibels. And the higher this is, the more quickly it compresses, and this is in milliseconds. So at the moment I've got that set to 2 milliseconds, so it's kind of an average application of that. So we want it to moderately compress it fairly quickly once it's gone over the threshold. But you can roll that back, and what you're going to get is more sustain and a more gradual compression sound. And finally, release is how quickly it stops compressing once it dips below the threshold. And so we've got it set at 50 milliseconds. This means that actually once it dips below the threshold, within 50 milliseconds, it will stop compressing. So that's quite a quick application of it. So we have it at 25%. And so those are those charts down here. The out meter here is for you to adjust the volume out sound, because what you're doing with the compression is you're effectively squashing the volume at the high end of the audio signal, and you're going to need to compensate for that when you want to mix it. So you can increase the audio out signal here, the output, to compensate for the compression that's been added. Couple of other things to mention down here that are the peak and the RMS. So the peak, these are different settings for different instruments. So for where you want to you've got a kind of smoother instrument going on, like a guitar or vocals, you'd want to click RMS. And for something where you're going to get more sudden peaks or spikes in volume and decibel levels, that top end of the audio signal, such as a drum snare or a kick drum where it's a quick, intense sudden spike in sound, you're going to want peak, because that will tackle those kind of more extreme spikes in sound more easily. So that's the RMS and the peak. And the final thing to mention is you've got different settings down here, so you can actually click on this view here, which if we just hover over here tells you that this is the info view, and this actually gives you basically the same kind of view that you're getting here, but from the side. So rather than looking top down on the audio patterns that are being presented to you on the screen, where the wider the pattern here, the louder the sound is, and the narrower it is, the quieter the pattern. Sorry, the narrower the pattern, the quieter the sound. You're getting a side-on view at that, and I'll show you that in a minute. But what you've essentially got going on in this pattern here is you've got the quietest parts of the sound in the narrowest parts, and then the loudest parts here. So between here and here is kind of your difference in volume fluctuations, and where you're applying compression, you're deciding how much of these spikes you want to cut off the sound and squash back down in the mix. It's not a dramatic increase, as we've said, because it's a guitar sound and it's an electric guitar sound, and it's quite consistent in terms of the input and the signal that it's actually capturing and recording. But if you recorded something like vocals or maybe an acoustic guitar, you might find that those differences between the loudest and the quietest parts of the signal are more extreme. So this is a top-down view of that. If you then click on this and click on the let's get the right view, click on the signal view, you'll see you've got a couple of lines, and if I play it through, you'll see you're getting a side-on view of the signal. So you've got a mounting range looking at it from the side, and those bottom bits in the mounting range are the quietest part of the signal, and the heights of the mounting range are the loudest parts of the signal. So I'll just play that again to demonstrate that. So this blue line actually corresponds to the decibel threshold level that you've got set on here. So if you move this up and down, you're changing where this blue line is on here. You can equally hover over this, click on it and drag it up and down, or you can hover over the line, click on it and drag it up and down. It has the same effect of moving the dial, or moving the arrow here, the threshold here, the line, to determine where you want to set the threshold. But an observation on this, if we just play the sound again, is that there's nothing in the sound here that's going above this blue line. If we move it to here, which is at 10 decibels, there's nothing in the volume that's going beyond 10 decibels. Let's just play that again so we can absolutely see that's the case. So you can see the loudest part of the take are coming out around about where the blue line is. So that means that if we set the threshold any higher than that, we're not going to be applying any compression, because there's no signal any higher than minus 10 decibels in what we've recorded here. It might have been that I could have set the recording level a bit higher and captured a louder take, but for the purposes of what I recorded, it's all coming out at around about 10 decibels maximum. And then you can see down here it's probably coming out at about minus 26 decibels minimum, so quite a quiet bottom end there. And what you need to do is set this line, which you can do on here or on here by dragging this up and down, really to determine where you want to start smoothing out the signal. So if you set it down here at the quietest point in the take, you're gonna basically reduce the sound right down to the quietest points that it's being recorded. If you have it at the top, equally around 10 decibels, which was at the highest point, you're not going to take anything off at all other than really than the very high bits. So you're going to need to position it somewhere between those two, between the loudest and the quietest parts of the take. And with something like guitar, you don't want to lose some of the nuances in what you're playing. You know, it doesn't. What you don't want a kind of a monotone volume level, because that's part of the expression of what you're playing. But similarly, you want to kind of take some of that top end off. So I'd set it further near the top. Let's just play that again. Probably set it around here. So you're taking off a lot of those spikes, but you're not smoothing it out completely. You're not compressing all of the expression out of what you've recorded. And I think that's really important when you are applying compression. And over the next few videos, I'm going to look at how you apply compression to different instruments, because you're going to need to apply different techniques to the kinds of instruments that you've recorded. And just getting a feel for where you want it, really. But ultimately, it does kind of depend on what sound you're looking for. So if you've got a kind of a thrash metal sound going on, like a Metallica sound going on or something, they really do compress their instruments really right down, because it needs to kind of blend into the bass and the kick and just all kind of mesh together. So something like that, you might want to set the compression as quite high and that threshold quite low, so your tolerance to how much sound you want above that threshold is going to be quite limited. You want to apply quite a severe threshold to it. But with other types of music, you might want to have less of a threshold going on. So that's how you use the compressor, and I hope that helps. If you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Really appreciate the thumbs up. I'm trying to grow the channel, and it would be great if you could subscribe to this channel as well. There's going to be a lot more videos coming out on Ableton's audio effects and how to apply them to different instruments. So just wanted to finish off by saying thank you for watching. Don't forget to adjust the output volume using this dial here. In fact, if you click in there, sorry for the interruption on the ending there, but if you click in there, you can probably tell that the actual compression was adding more volume to it. So I'm just going to roll back the output there. I don't have a huge amount of compression on this guitar. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Thank you for watching. Thanks for your ongoing support. And if you are a subscriber, fantastic. Thanks again for joining us. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel. And I look forward to speaking to you in the next Speakerstack video. Thanks very much.